Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today is Phil Williams, News Channel 5's chief investigative reporter. Phil, in these indictments involving former Speaker and his top aide, Mr. Cothren, there's talk about kickbacks. There's talking about bribery. How does that play into this?
So they set up this mailing company, Phoenix Solutions, and then, according to the indictment, former Speaker Casada, who remained in the legislature, he and then Representative Robin Smith would use their positions in the legislature to steer state business to Phoenix Solutions. They would also use their positions within the House Republican caucus to steer caucus business to Phoenix Solutions. In exchange for doing that, they would get kickbacks for their efforts, and so that's where the bribes and kickbacks part comes in.
Some real chutzpah here, I think, because as I understand the indictment, this scheme didn't even get hatched by the two defendants until after Glen Casada had decided under pressure to resign from his office as House Speaker. Didn't they know they were doing, and they seemed to know they were doing something wrong? You read some of those text messages, don't mention my name, don't let them know that I have anything to do, and both of them said that.
Yeah, because, you know, in the case of the caucus, for example, they had rules that the caucus would not do business with members of the Republican caucus. And so they were disguising their identities for this. I mean, it is so tragic in a way that Casada was forced out of his speakership as a result of a texting scandal that we uncovered. Cothren was forced to resign from his position with the legislature. And then for their next chapter, they turn and come up with this scheme that's all documented in text messages.
You mentioned another state representative, Robin Smith from Chattanooga, who resigned and has pled guilty in this case. Is she going to wind up being the star witness on the stand for a lot of this stuff?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Part of her plea agreement from earlier this year was that she would cooperate, and she certainly knows where the skeletons are on Capitol Hill. She was former chair of the Tennessee Republican Party, so she has a lot of insight.
Has she been sentenced at this point? What is she likely to get out of this for cooperating and testifying?
She is scheduled to be sentenced in a couple of months, as I recall. That can always be pushed back. The reason, the incentive you have to cut a deal early is that you get points for what they call substantial cooperation. So if you offer the feds a lot in their continuing investigation, that helps knock things off of your sentence.
You talked about things being pushed back. The feds have a pretty speedy trial provision on all their cases. This is set to go to trial. The entire indictment in the end of the day goes up October 25th. That seems pretty quick. Do you think there's a pretty good likelihood that's not going to be the real date when this goes to trial?
Yeah, it is rare that these sorts of cases go to trial on the first court date, but under the speedy trial provisions, the defense has to be offered that option.
When the two were arraigned the other day, when Cade Cothren left, he specifically said to you, Phil, the truth is going to come out about this. What in the world is he talking about? Is there more to this than we know? There are other investigations that could be going on with this, and these two, one or both, may turn state's evidence on those as well?
It was certainly cryptic, I would say that. I have known Mr. Cothren now for more than 3 years, and he's been the subject of various investigations. Certainly, again, he would be one of those who knows where the skeletons are if he's interested in cutting a deal.
You talked about, you've done several stories about the voucher vote that was held in the legislature, that the speaker had to lobby in to get the votes to get it passed. It passed by one vote. Is that possibly something that could become a part of this because they know something about how that happened? There's been reports that you had that somebody was offered a generalship in the Tennessee National Guard. Is that, you asked one of the lawyers and they quickly avoided even responding to that question that you asked them.
Yeah, so we reported actually during the 2019 legislative session that the FBI had been asking around about that voucher vote, and then we reported about the alleged bribe offer to be promoted to general. We don't really know where that phase of the investigation stands right now.
But you do think there is an investigation that's still ongoing into that?
We know that there was one. We're not sure exactly the status of it right now, but it would make sense because if you look at this indictment of Casada and Cothren, it's a fairly small amount of money. And so you really have to wonder, is this the ultimate objective, or is this just a means to an end?
Are these two going to seek to be tried separately? Do you think they have something on each other? They may say, well, I didn't do that, but he did this.
I think that's unlikely, but again, there's always incentive to be the one to cut the deal.
So this latest indictment is perhaps far from the end of the story?
I don't think there's any doubt that there is more to come.
One of the final things before I think we'll take another break, I noticed that we've had comments from both sides of the aisle of how terrible this was that it happened, but I noticed in particular that none of the Republicans made what is usually a normal thing you see in statements like this as well. But remember, these people are guilty until they're proven innocent, or they're innocent until they're proven guilty. Did you find that kind of odd? That's almost always in there, but it wasn't. Have they already know that this is probably not going to be a case that somebody's going to be found innocent after this?
Speaker Sexton has certainly intimated that he has been cooperating with this investigation, and so he may have a lot more insight. Plus, Glen Casada doesn't have a lot of friends up there these days.
Phil Williams, our guest. He's the chief investigative reporter at News Channel 5. We're talking about the big news on Capitol Hill this week, the latest scandal on the Hill involving the former Speaker of the Tennessee General Assembly, Glen Casada, and his top aide. Back to continue our conversation with Phil on the other side of this break.